hope recognizes that the bad exists, but it also recognizes that it doesn't have to be that way. So we don't want to sugarcoat reality, right? But we want to be able to show that there are people doing the work, that you're not alone. If you want to do something, here are practical things that you can do about it. You're listening to Drawing on Hope, where we speak to awesome people about the causes they care about, their vision for a better tomorrow, and what we can do to help us all get there. Today, we're turning the tables around as guest host Carl Javier of Data and AI Ethics PH hosts a conversation with me about this podcast, why we put it together, and what we hope to accomplish with it. Let's just get right to it.
Right. So I believe I am guest hosting this episode of Drawing on Hope. I am Carl Javier, and I'm here because I'm going to interview your usual host, Elbert. Hey, man. Kumusta?
I'm good. I am in a I'm in this liminal space where I both know what I'm doing, but also I don't know what I'm doing.
Nice.
And the
That's where
podcast
you
is one
grow.
of those things. Yeah, the podcast is one of those projects.
So why does this podcast exist?
I guess because like looking back at the last 10 years of Pushpin and trying to imagine what would the next 10 years look like. Um, there's this there's this sense of me wanting to do more and go beyond supporting advocacy for others, but also maybe recognizing that we've gone 10 years as Pushpin, and that maybe we can also serve as a platform to amplify voices that we admire. And so that was really one of the things that we wanted to see, if we can go beyond just reposting what clients tell us to make,
Yeah.
to you know also having something to say about some of the advocacies we work on, some of the issues that maybe we don't have clients who take us on, but we feel strongly about. And so that's really the genesis of it.
So if someone told me they were starting a podcast in 2025, I I might have some questions for them. But actually this one, I'm more excited in terms of, well, one, obviously because you invited me, but but really it's because you've built out such an interesting catalog of clients over the last 10 years. So um one, can you share like some people that are on deck, that people can look forward to, and then some that you're aspiring for?
So we wanted a roster of change makers who we believe in and whose advocacies we feel strongly about. There are, I guess, the people and causes that you would expect. Like, for example, we started with Reese Fernandez
Yeah.
talking about uh, her fight against poverty, her advocacy for kindness, her work in social entrepreneurship. We also talked to um, upcoming guests. We'll
Yeah.
also be talking to, and we'll be featuring as well, some of the more obvious ones like UN Women,
Right.
World Vision. Um, but we also want to highlight some of the smaller organizations that do really compelling work. We already released our second episode at the time of this recording, where we talked to Angat Bayi,
Mm.
Ayla's the executive director, and what they advocate for is women in leadership positions, particularly in public office. So, what would a world with more women in government look like, right?
Mm.
Is, I think, an interesting question for me to explore. We'll also be talking to Inez of No Box Foundation,
Mm.
where they advocate for a very different way of looking at and engaging with drug addiction, right? Where it's not just whatever the stigma is towards drug addiction, but really having a more compassionate view of it. Um, and finally, we're also gonna be talking to Kive Foundation, which has been
Yeah,
around
right.
for
Yeah.
33 years, and is doing really good work providing psychosocial care for children with serious illnesses. So it's really a mix of voices that you may have already heard a lot of times before, but we're trying to take a different look and different perspective at the work that they're doing, um, as well as some of the less vocal organizations. But the impression that we want people to take away from this is really that positive change can look different. It's not just a homogeneous, I want to get into a hypothetical nonprofit, but what does what does that hypothetical nonprofit really look like? What does it look like to fight for change if you are a social entrepreneur, versus if you are in an international nonprofit versus a smaller local nonprofit? What does it look like if I just work for a corporate foundation? So these are different aspects. Or even if I'm just a private citizen wanting to build community of like-minded people, can I do that? Can I make that happen? What would it look like? And the reason why we want to be able to show these different things is because we want to be able to show that whether big or small, there are things that people can do to make positive change happen for everyone.
Yeah, I want to ask more questions about that and how people can get more involved. But before we go there, I wanted to ask because um, I've known you and Pushpin long enough to know that you were working corporate clients and private sector, and you were doing pretty good business there. Um,
Yeah,
and the last few years, it's been all in on social causes, foundations. If it's corporate foundations. Um, was there like a eureka moment? Was there a personal shift in advocacy, or did this just make sense market wise?
I think the advocacy has always been there. When we first founded Pushpin, that has always been part and parcel of the vision that we had, that we wanted to use our talents for social change. But then I guess because we didn't know any better, the
Mm.
thought that we had was, oh no, but maybe we would need the corporate to make up the difference. But I think over the years, it was really just, I think the switch was that we were really just finding ourselves more motivated and more energized whenever we would do things like, hey, can you go to a fishing community, help us with our capacity building program, teach them what we want them to know so that they can have better practices. um and the reality is, there's a long line of creatives who are more than happy to take on the sexy corporate clients,
Mhm.
but might not be as willing to devote the time and energy to take on the nonprofit work, to take on the advocacy work. Um, and so that's where we just decided to stay, like where we can make a bigger difference.
Yeah, so they're not gonna your corporates aren't gonna have a hard time finding some other agency for delivery, but
Yeah,
you can create much more impact, one, and then two, you are much more energized by this kind of work.
for sure. Yeah.
I'm wondering now about your audience for for this show. If you're imagining it as like, is it kind of crusty older people like us who are trying to have more impact? Is it young people? What are we trying to hit here?
I think over the past few years, especially when you look at the content that you would probably see on your social media feeds, in part because negativity tends to be louder regardless of the
Hmm.
platform, but certainly more amplified on social media because of the algorithms. I think there's a general sense of overwhelm, anger, tiredness about what's happening in the world. And what we want to be able to do was to give back some sense of agency.
Okay.
Hopefully, through the stories we tell, people can recognize that, if my heart is being burdened by this particular issue, that there is something that I can do about it. And mind you, I don't want to just fill your feed with empty platitude and hallmark statements, right? I mean, the reason why we talk about drawing on hope and not just drawing on optimism is because we make a distinction between those two things. Optimism is I will, you know, look at the bright side of things regardless of whether the house is burning or not, diba? Naivete doesn't even know that the house is burning. I'm just looking at the bright side. Hope recognizes that the bad exists, but it also recognizes that it doesn't have to be that way. So we don't want to sugarcoat reality, right? But we want to be able to show that there are people doing the work, that you're not alone. If you want to do something, here are practical things that you can do about it. And I think being able to tell that story where, hey, here's a vision of what a brighter tomorrow can look like. Here's a pathway that we can take to get there. And by the way, you have agency. There is something that you can do to help out. I think that's a crucial component of being able to instill hope.
So I'm thinking about because we're talking about kind of the world is burning, and also acknowledging one that we're having this conversation of nonprofits and social enterprises with funding cuts. There's a large, I believe, narrative that nonprofits are inefficient, that the whole sector, like whatever. And so as a result, I think there is a narrative of certain people that, like, you should just make money and pay taxes. And all of this stuff is, this may be a big ask, right? But make a case for the nonprofit work. Like, why should this be something that, you know anyone who's concerned with a better society,
Right.
should be thinking about?
So so the way I see it is we're in an ecosystem made up of the public sector, government, the private sector, and I guess the nonprofits, right? And I see the role of private sector as market will present the opportunities that private sector can capitalize on and solve the social problems that would make fiscal sense to do so. See, government, their job is to solve the problems that capitalism is not incentivized to solve, right? So if it doesn't make money to set up infrastructure so that people in remote provinces can have internet, then companies, you can't expect them to do it. Government should be the one to do it. But government at the same time also faces limited resources and limited perspectives because by nature, like, this is what we're able to see. So I think civil society, nonprofits, advocates, that's where we come in because we're the ones who will call attention to government and even to private sectors that these are the problems that need to be addressed. And by the way, we want to hold you accountable for it. And so through those partnerships, I think is where we can, in the ideal case, if you know, if all goes well together, that's how we make progress as a society. Where you have private sector with their expertise, with their capital, solving problems that make them money and address market needs, solves problems for individuals and companies. right? You have government who will solve the problems that private sector will not, and then the nonprofits, the advocates, here are the issues that you need to be aware of, government, right? um let's hold you accountable to it.
I'm very curious because you get to talk to so many people working in this civil society space. And I let you talk through that because I really think it's important. Right? I'm fully 100% in agreement. My follow up and build out there is we have we have a lot of social entrepreneurs. We have a lot of people who work in nonprofits. Um, we have some corporate foundations. Feels still centralized, but that's also because of the way that businesses are structured under conglomerates and
Yeah,
they're right. And then we do have government, and for whatever complaints and challenges, we also need to acknowledge that there's a lot of good people working
yeah.
in government offices trying to do good work. Um, but what are the things that, let's say I'm listening to this, and if I'm a young person, I'm thinking about starting my social enterprise or whatever else. But what are other possible opportunities that, or what are the things that this ecosystem needs to become more powerful?
What it really needs, and it's also why we decided let's put together the show, is really more people taking action. Whether your decision is I will work for a big company, or I will start a small nonprofit, or I will go into public service. Um, what we really need is more people lending their time, talent, and treasures
Hmm.
to serve something beyond themselves. And I think that's really the key, because you can go into any of these sectors regardless and still be serving just yourself. I'm in it for the salary, I'm in it for the
Mm.
fame, I'm in it for the influence and the glory and whatever, right? But the key thing, I think, is recognizing that there are people outside of yourself that might not have the same privileges or perspective or expertise or talent that you have, that they could greatly benefit from. Um, what's in it for people to do that? What's in it for people is that we are a society, and we are not designed to be on our own, you know? uh, I think there is no number one. I think there's no greater fulfillment than being able to help other people, right?
Hmm.
But even on a practical level, these other people who, if you choose to lift them up, you also get to go along with them, and so we uplift each other as a collective in a way that we cannot if, for example, you choose to just lift yourself up and leave others behind, right? Right.
So I'm gathering here this idea that um, through these conversations, you're actually helping to build more of a social imagination. Like this sense that we belong to something bigger. I do think that you wouldn't do nonprofit work. You wouldn't do volunteer work if you didn't feel like you were connected to
Yeah.
people, causes, and these things. And it's also hard, like when we had our conversation with June of World Vision, and I was joking about, hey, you guys, I passed by you guys in the mall, and you say, the airport na kami ngayon, ganyan. But like, it's this sense of the lack of a connection to other people means that I actually am a lesser person. And so I think what's really nice about what you're
Well,
saying is that I become more human by building on those connections with other humans.
so let me qualify that I become a lesser person statement a bit, and add a
Uh,
caveat, right? Um, I think part also of why we're doing this and telling these stories is because I'm also a believer that all of us are human, And therefore, while we have a great capacity to love and care for others, there's also a limit to our energy to care for others, right? And so you ignoring a UNHCR kiosk at the airport or a World Vision stall at a booth where all they're trying to do is to explain their advocacy to you doesn't make you a lesser person. It just probably means that that's not the cause that's been
Yeah.
planted in your heart to care about, right?
Hmm.
Um, uh, some people would care about street cats. I personally don't, but someone has to,
Gonna-
right? Someone has
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah. Someone
diba?
has to. Yeah.
Same way that I feel strongly for child trafficking and unpaid care work, maybe others don't care, diba?
Yeah.
So I think that's also where what I was saying earlier about we need more people taking action on the causes they care about comes in, because you can't expect the people who are in the community of
Hmm.
change makers to do the work on everything that's wrong with the world.
That's true. No, I was thinking in terms of modality, where
Yeah.
like I might walk past those people, but if I hear them in your podcast, this is the
Yeah.
modality that would work for me. And I'm like, ah, yeah, so that's why they do the work they do. And that's actually
Yeah.
how it works. And that might be the way. Although I would say I do think that a lack of connection does make us less human. And I do think that I don't know, this might be a challenge to it all, but I one of the reasons why I like podcasts over say social media is the sense that because the algorithms drive us towards negativity, and because like we're fed stuff like a lot of even if you say that YouTube is a social platform, like that still feels very one directional, especially
Yeah.
when that algorithm starts putting you down rabbit holes. And that's why I say you feel lesser in that your capacity for connecting to other humans is lessened
Yeah.
because of like the interventions of these things and maybe these conversations. So and I would imagine then that this podcast becomes a platform as a starting point for conversations, right? Like it's hear these people talk, find out more about them, and then move beyond that. When you say people need to take action, that's I guess what this ties to is what action can people take after they start listening to this. Obviously, after one episode, it won't happen, but maybe
Yeah.
two or three episodes will inspire.
No, there's one very simple next step that we always want listeners to take,
Hmm.
which is that they either click on the show notes or go to Google or even Chat GPT, whatever they use to search. But the hope is they are compelled enough by the advocacy or the guest to click more and learn more.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I think for us, what we're trying to be careful about when we talk to our guests is that we're not just profiling superheroes and
Yeah,
experts and
sure.
look at these people who are aspirational in nature, but really bring that down and show that they're real people, founders, field workers, volunteers across Southeast Asia who are deeply rooted, deeply involved, deeply invested in the work that they do. Because, we were talking about care and connection, and does this modality make sense? Um, we don't want kasi to just inspire. We want to be able to bring people in. So it's not just, hey, look at us from afar. It's, hey, can let's have a connection. Here's the context. Here's what's possible. And we might not have all the answers, by the way, but we can at least offer stories and questions, and a sense of shared humanity, right? That whether the work is small scale or behind the scenes, we're all connected, all of it matters, and you can add to it, you can help.
So the challenge I now have is one, like your first episode was Reese, and I listened, and I'm like, and I've heard so many interviews with her, read about her, met her a few times, and it only reinforced this feeling like, man, this person, just the resiliency is kind of superhero level. And then I know that you're going to be interviewing Ines from No Box, and for me, like, No Box meant like all those people who work there are like superheroes. Like the work that they do is on that level, and I think, the more I meet people who are program officers, people who are going out into
Yeah.
communities and doing this work, the more it actually feels to me that I cannot live up to those things. And so I guess, what do you say to somebody like, they'll hear your guest list, and I know you're like, well, these are people, and it's not just us, but really they are doing kind of superhero level work. What is the midpoint for somebody who listens, and like, how can they imagine themselves there?
Oh, I love the question. You're right. I don't want to minimize their accomplishments. I don't want to minimize their efforts. It is super heroic that they're able to do this, accomplish whatever they've accomplished, and still be at it, right?
Yeah.
Endurance and stamina and persistence,
Diba?
like
Yeah.
iba. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
different level at all.
And the compassion, like for example, No Box, the level of
Yeah,
compassion that those people have for, for the people that they work with, especially in our society of like demonizing, man, ibang level yun. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, but I think that's where the stories come in. Number one, I would say that hopefully we're able to bring out their stories in a way that shows that they didn't start fully formed like Athena. I was
Mm-hmm.
born to be a bleeding heart, give to the world kind of person, right? Some of them came from a long series of adversities. Some of them just had an aha moment and it was an instant switch. Oh no, I need to do something about this. Um, but I think that comes with the work, that
Mm-hmm.
there are certain people where, and I think it's the same with a lot of the work that we do. When you're trying to work for someone else, the more you are involved and the more that you can see and experience what life is like outside of your lived experience, the more you can't help but respond in kindness and care and compassion. And that fuels them to go farther, do more, do better than I I suspect even they would think possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's why I said it for me, the next step, if you listen to the show, if something moves your heart, if you just take the 10 minutes to learn more about the org or the advocacy or the person, that's something. And it might not take today or tomorrow, it might take a few years to bear fruit. But if the continued engagement and desire to know about a particular cause hopefully eventually moves them into action, and everyone can become superheroes like them, right? um Not that I'm saying I'm an example, but just so there's a middle ground, right? Because I'm not anything like them at all, right? I come from a space of fear where this movement you were asking earlier, parang, oh, how did you go from serving corporate clients to now pretty much almost exclusively doing nonprofit work or advocacy work? um that was a long struggle. I've always been drawn to development work even as early as in college, but I've always had it in the back of my mind. But I want money, but I want comfort, right? But I want aircon. Um, all these creature comforts hard for me to let go of. Um, and even now, sure, I'm more willing to be adventurous and go to different places, do whatever. But now I have a wife and kids, and I feel like the fear has now shifted to, but I don't want to drag them into my decisions of sacrificing for whatever, right? And so part of how I've reconciled it with myself is really just okay within the sphere of what I'm capable of, what talents, what time, what treasures I have. How can I stretch myself beyond comfort and
Mm,
contribute what I can? And then just kind of work my way, see how far it goes. Um, by no means am I a model, but it's just a way of saying it doesn't excuse us from being able to do something,
right.
even if you can't do everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it can be overwhelming. And also when you
Yeah.
list down all the issues of all of the potential things that we could be doing and all of the challenges for it, I do think it can prevent people, and it can make people go, shoot, I don't think I'm going to be able to make an impact because there's just the issues are so big. And I think that's why some of these issues win. It's like some of the negative forces win is because it just feels so big for us. So understanding our context, our
Yeah.
personal capacities and limitations is going to be really important for us
Yeah.
to find, like, it's not about solving the big problem, but it's about how we as individuals can plug into communities and organizations
Yeah.
and advocacies that are addressing that bigger problem. Um, yeah. So
and
to
and
close
even
out,
and even
yeah,
before that, and even before that, Carl, you know, plugging yourself in, but also recognizing that hope is a practice, hope is a skill. So I
yeah,
think you were talking earlier about, it's easy to get overwhelmed. It is easy to get overwhelmed. Some of these issues are even very systemic or very interconnected, intersectional. um and it's hard to just isolate and address
yeah,
one part of the thing without knowing if it's the symptom that you're treating or the actual problem or the actual illness. But 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 I guess that's also why we're trying to do this, and we're not just doing this as a one off, but it's really like a commitment to see how much of this we can go, how far we can go with this, because we want to be able to also share a mindset of hope, that it's a skill that you practice, it's a mindset that you develop. um, it's something that we draw on and pass on and share with others as well. It's not wishful thinking,
yeah,
right? It is, like I said earlier, making a distinction between optimism and hope, and knowing that hope recognizes that, yeah, it can be overwhelming, it is bad out there, but there's something that we can do about it. And it's very telling, just to maybe wrap up what I'm saying. um it's very telling that over the past half dozen interviews we've had with people, the conversations we've had, it always goes back to the notion of collective care in in all its various terms, variations. Na it's about caring for others, compassion for others. Because I think one of the things that you can latch onto when you're feeling overwhelmed is to embrace the idea that, sure, maybe I can only devote 1 week or even 1 hour out of every week. Maybe that's all I can give for this particular cause. But I can draw hope from the fact that there are others who are working in the same space as me. There are others who are chipping away at the problem so that I can rest for a while and recharge myself and then rejoin when I can. And I hope that that's where people can find more confidence and motivation to take part and do something, knowing that we're all fighting this fight. We have each other's back. It's for others as well, and that there's something we can do about it.
yeah. So I have one last thought here, um, and I want to connect it to our past as artists, artists and creative people, and that's, I like that you brought forward the term mindset, and that it's a mindset and the idea of a collective, and it connects to some of the ideas that I've been playing around with in our conversation. Largely, this sense of imagination, and so imagining a bigger thing, imagining and so imagining with hope, diba? Like it's really like a if we are only realist and we are only looking at the practical level of things, then it limits our ability to um, map out moves and
Yeah.
options. But if
Yeah.
we draw on our imagination and we feed our imagination with
Yeah.
stories and with hope, then we can create more impact. I think that does that tie it all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And maybe I'll also close out myself by saying that's exactly why we're calling it drawing on hope, right? We want to be able to paint a collective picture uh, of what a brighter future can look like, especially for those who might feel tired, disillusioned, or might be wondering if change is even possible. This practice of social imagination is something that we want to be able to offer and share with the world.
amazing. So I had so much fun, and I'm looking forward to the episodes. But I will hand off to you in case you already have a closing spiel for this new show.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Drawing on Hope. If you found this conversation meaningful, share it with someone who could use a little hope and inspiration. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. Drawing on Hope is a podcast by Pushpin, a social impact design agency that uses drawings and stories to help make things make sense. Follow us at Pushpin Visuals on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, or visit www.pushpinvisuals.com. The show is hosted by me, Elbert Or, with production support from LJ Bautista, art direction by VG Daguna, and editing by Miko Migrino of Studio in Momentum. Thanks for listening, and remember, hope isn't something we wait for, it's something we create.